New York City creates more Fort Lauderdale buyers than any other area in the country. And when you actually sit down and run the numbers, it makes sense. In this video, we're going over exactly what's driving New York City buyers to Fort Lauderdale specifically, the tax math, the cost per square foot reality, the pace of life trade-off, and what Fort Lauderdale delivers that makes it the most direct lifestyle upgrade available to a New Yorker who is ready to stop subsidizing a city that stopped giving back what it takes. My name is Steve McAleer. I've been selling real estate in Fort Lauderdale for 20 years, completed over 600 transactions in this market, and I work with The Agency, one of the premier luxury brokerages in the country. New York buyers are a significant part of my business and have been for most of my career. I understand this buyer well, the sophistication, the standards, the pace they're used to operating at, the specific things they will not compromise on, and the specific things they are desperate to leave behind. I've watched hundreds of New Yorkers make this move, the ones who do it right, who understand what they're buying into and prepare for the transition thoughtfully, almost universally describe it as one of the best decisions of their lives. The ones who struggle are usually the ones who came for the tax savings without genuinely wanting the lifestyle shift. So let's talk about both sides of it, honestly. So let's start off with the financial case, because for New York City residents, it's much more dramatic than any other area in the country. And I want to put real numbers to it instead of speaking in just generalities. New York State's top marginal income tax rate is 10.9%. New York City has its own tax rate on top of that. The city rate for high earners is 3.876%. So a high-earning New York resident, someone making $750,000 a year, which is not an unusual profile for the buyers I work with, is paying a combined city and state income tax rate of approximately 14.8% before federal. That is nearly 15 cents out of every dollar earned going back to the state and city before the federal government takes its share. On $750,000 of income, that's roughly $111,000 a year in state and income tax alone every year. That's a number that becomes very concrete very fast when you write it out. Florida has no state income tax, zero. The same $750,000 earner living in Fort Lauderdale pays $0 in state income tax and $0 in city income tax. The $111,000 stays with them every year. Compounded over a decade, that is over $1 million. And that's before you account for the property tax differential, which for most buyers coming from Manhattan or the New York suburbs is also significant. New York City property taxes on a $2 million co-op or condo are complex and often lower than you'd expect due to the way the city's tax classification system works for residential properties. But buyers coming from Westchester, Long Island, or suburban New Jersey, which is a large share of the greater New York buyer pool, are paying effective property tax rates of 2 to 2.5% on their current homes. On a $1.5 million home in Westchester, that's $30,000 to $37,000 a year in property taxes. In Broward County, at the same assessed value, you're looking at roughly $26,000 if your property is homestead. Again, verify your specific situation with a CPA who handles multi-state tax planning. The details of domicile establishment, the 183-day rule, maintaining New York ties versus establishing Florida ties, these are real considerations that require professional guidance. But that directional math is not close. Now, let's talk about real estate specifically, because the cost per square foot conversation between New York City and South Florida really exists. In Manhattan, the price per square foot for a condo or co-op sits somewhere between $1,400 and $2,000, depending on the neighborhood and the building. In prime neighborhoods, the Upper East Side, Tribeca, the West Village, you are regularly paying $2,000 to $3,500 per square foot for well-positioned product. An 1,800 square foot apartment in a good building in a good neighborhood in Manhattan is $3.5 to $5 million. And for that $3.5 to $5 million, you have 1,800 square feet, no outdoor space beyond perhaps a terrace, no private parking, monthly maintenance fees that frequently run $3,000 to $6,000 a month, and you're in an apartment building with hundreds of other people. In Fort Lauderdale's premium waterfront neighborhoods like Las Olas Isles, Harbor Beach, Rio Vista, $3.5 to $5 million buys you a single-family waterfront estate. We're talking 3,500 to 6,000 square feet of space, a private dock with ocean access, a pool, a yard, a garage, no shared walls, no elevator lobbies, no doorman to tip, no board approval process. You own the land, you own the structure. You can renovate it however you want without filing an alteration agreement with a co-op board. Even at the $1.5 million to $2.5 million level, which in Manhattan buys you a 1 or a 2-bedroom apartment in a decent building in a decent neighborhood, Fort Lauderdale delivers legitimate waterfront, canal front, single-family homes with private docks, 2,500 square feet of space, a pool, and ocean access. That comparison is not subtle. It's the kind of thing that buyers see once and cannot unsee. Here's where I want to be honest with New York buyers, where a lot of real estate content is not. Because the pace of life difference between New York City and Fort Lauderdale is real. And it's not necessarily initially comfortable for people who have lived in New York City their entire life. New York City operates at a pace and an intensity that is genuinely unique. The density of ambition, of commerce, of culture, of social life, it's compressed into a physical space in a way that creates an energy that people who love New York genuinely love. The restaurants, the museums, the theater, the proximity to the best of everything. The argument for New York as a place to live is a real argument, and I'm definitely not going to dismiss it. Fort Lauderdale is not that. Fort Lauderdale is a city of 200,000 people with a walkable main street, an excellent and growing restaurant scene, a world-class waterfront, and a pace that is meaningfully slower than New York in every measurable way. The energy here is horizontal rather than vertical. It's about outdoor life, water life, a rhythm that is set by weather and tides rather than by markets and meetings. For some New York buyers, that shift is immediately liberating. They arrive and they feel something decompress in them that they didn't realize was compressed. They sit on the dock in January with a coffee, and then thought of going back to a 14-hour workday in a Manhattan winter is genuinely hard to process. These buyers adapt quickly and completely. For other New York buyers, the adjustment is harder. The pace initially feels slow in a way that reads as boring rather than peaceful. The social density of New York, running into people you know, the serendipity of the city, the sense that something interesting is always happening within walking distance doesn't have a direct equivalent here. Building a social life in Fort Lauderdale requires intentionality in a way that New York never does, because New York just delivers it by the virtue of the density. The buyers who navigate this best are the ones who came to Fort Lauderdale because they genuinely wanted the lifestyle here. The water, the outdoor living, the warmth, the boat, not just the ones who came because they were tired of paying New York taxes. Tax savings are a great reason to make the financial decision, but they are not a sufficient reason to be happy in the place you land. And real quickly, if you're seriously considering moving to Fort Lauderdale from New York, I put together a great resource for you. It's called the Fort Lauderdale Homebuyer Guide. Inside, it includes information about neighborhoods and price points, what to buy and what to consider, and how to move here without second-guessing yourself. Relocating across the country can be overwhelming, so head to the description to download it. It's completely free. Let's talk about what Fort Lauderdale actually offers instead of just the tax savings. Because the buyers that have settled here came for more than just the financial savings. The waterfront lifestyle is the core of it. 165 miles of navigable waterways in Broward County, ocean access canals from residential neighborhoods that are 15 to 20 minutes from the airport. The ability to keep a boat at your dock, step off your back patio onto it, and be in the Atlantic in under 30 minutes from most of the premium waterfront neighborhoods. For New Yorkers who have spent their careers looking at the Hudson from a distance, the idea of owning that access directly, of the water being yours rather than the city's backdrop, is transformative in a way that's hard to fully communicate until you've lived it. Las Olas Boulevard has matured into a genuinely excellent walkable corridor. The restaurant quality has improved dramatically over the past decade. Not Manhattan, but genuinely good, with chefs and concepts that would hold their own in any major market. Creates a dining by boat culture that has no equivalent in New York. Waterfront restaurants with dock space where you arrive by boat on a Saturday night are a real and regular part of life here. The connectivity back to New York is practical and important for buyers who are making a partial transition or maintaining a business relationship up north. Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport has multiple daily nonstop flights to JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark. The flight is 2.5 hours. For buyers who are spending winters in Fort Lauderdale and summers in the Hamptons, or who are maintaining a New York business presence while establishing Florida residence, the logistics are genuinely manageable. The international dimension of Fort Lauderdale also resonates with New York buyers in a way that distinguishes it from other Florida markets. Fort Lauderdale has a significant significant Latin American business and cultural community, an international yachting and marine industry, and a cosmopolitan layer that cities like Naples or Sarasota don't carry. It's not Miami's international density, but it's closer to it than any other city on Florida's East Coast. And for buyers coming from genuinely global New York, that matters. Based on 20 years of working with buyers from the New York area, there are patterns in where they end up, and understanding those patterns can save you a significant time in your search. New York City buyers, Manhattan specifically, who are making a full lifestyle shift tend to gravitate towards neighborhoods like Las Olas Isles or Harbor Beach. These are Fort Lauderdale's most prestigious waterfront addresses. The buyers who have lived in the best buildings in Tribeca or the Upper East Side want the best of what Fort Lauderdale offers, and they're willing to pay for it. Las Olas Isles delivers the walkable to Las Olas waterfront estate lifestyle that is the closest thing Fort Lauderdale has to a premium Manhattan equivalent. Harbor Beach delivers privacy and security in a gated, deep-water enclave that appeals to buyers who have been living in dormant buildings and value controlled access. Buyers coming from Westchester, Long Island, and suburban New Jersey, the family-oriented New York suburbs, often land further north in Broward or in the western suburbs. Parkland, in particular, is a direct cultural translation for buyers coming from communities like Scarsdale or Short Hills. Strong schools, large lots, low density, a heavily northeast transplant community. Buyers from these areas who are moving for lifestyle but want their kids in excellent schools and their social environment to feel familiar frequently end up in Parkland or Weston and describe the transition as immediately comfortable. Buyers who are doing a part-time transition, establishing Florida residency while maintaining New York presence, often start with the luxury condo market downtown or near the beach. A lock-and-leave property that they can occupy for the required time to establish residency without the full commitment of a single-family home they need to manage year-round. The luxury high-rise market in Fort Lauderdale serves the buyer well and tends to be their entry point into the market before they understand it well enough to commit to a neighborhood and a lifestyle. The buyers that I've seen make this move successfully, who are genuinely happy after 5 years with no regrets, tend to do a few things that the buyers who struggle don't. They visit intentionally before they buy, not a vacation, a scouting trip with a purpose. Spending times in neighborhoods, eating at the restaurants they'd actually go to, driving the commutes they'd actually drive, asking themselves honestly whether this is the daily life they want. 2 or 3 intentional trips, ideally in different seasons, will tell you more than 2 years of online research. They establish their social infrastructure before they need it. The Fort Lauderdale transplant community from New York is large and active. There are people here who went to the same schools, worked in the same industries, and made this exact move 5 or 10 years ahead of you. Finding those people, getting into the environments where they congregate, is the work of the first year. Buyers who do that work end up with a full social life. Buyers who wait for it to happen organically sometimes wait a long time. They hire a Fort Lauderdale-specific tax and legal team to handle the transition properly. Establishing Florida homestead while maintaining any New York ties requires getting the details right. The 183-day rule, changing your voter registration, your vehicle registration, your primary banking relationships, your professional associations. New York State is aggressive about auditing high earners who claim to have left. Doing this correctly from the beginning is not optional. The tax savings that justified the move in the first place depend on the homestead transition being done correctly. And they buy for lifestyle, not just for the financial case. The buyers who are the happiest here are the ones on the water. They use the boat. They're on Las Olas Thursday evenings or Sunday afternoons. They found their restaurants and their people and their version of this place. The financial case got them here. The lifestyle is what keeps them here. And that wraps up this video. If you're currently in New York or New York City and looking to move to South Florida or Fort Lauderdale, all of my contact details are below.